Hello everyone, and welcome to another Monster Hunter World video. This is Thegameconomist, and today I have for you 8 tips for defeating Arch-Tempered Teostra. If you have any excellent tips that you would like to share, please add them to the comment section and I'll pin the best one. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Tip number 8 is for players who are playing solo. Don't forget to bring the Fortitude skill, and this really applies to all of your hunts. If you like to play solo, the Fortitude skill is really just too strong to give up. Essentially what you can allow yourself to do, allow the monster to kill you twice, and try to do that when you need to head back to the camp anyways for more consumables, and when he kills you, you're going to get a nice bonus to your attack and to your defense that's based on percentages rather than additive. It's a multiplicative bonus. That means you're going to become really strong after you die twice. And you can stack that either with a defensive build or an offensive build. So this one's just for the solo players. Really, don't forget the Fortitude skill is a very cheap skill. Tip number 7, this is kind of an obvious one. Don't forget to bring the Fire Mantle, but I'm going to add a little bit to it. One of the things you guys can do is if you have the Rocksteady Mantle and you have the Temporal Mantle, once one or both of those are used up, jump back to camp using a Farcaster and then just change out your mantles so that you don't have to wait for their long recharge time. So after you've finished using Rocksteady Mantle and after you've finished using the overpowered Temporal Mantle, just go back to camp and grab the Fireproof Mantle and whatever other mantle you think is going to be useful. Tip number 6, and I think a lot of newer players don't know this one. In the game, there's a skill called Fire Resistance, right? And if you raise your elemental resistance against Teostra, his fire attacks are going to do less damage to you. But more importantly, if you bring your fire resistance up to 20, he's not going to be able to fire blight you anymore, and that's really useful. Because when you get fire blighted, you're constantly having to roll out of that and get rid of it. Well, if you just didn't get fire blighted, you can spend more time fighting, and you're taking less damage from his fire attacks anyways. Alright, we're moving on to tip number 5. So this is one that I think even more advanced players probably have overlooked or they just weren't aware of it. In Elder's Recess, there is a pod that you can pick up called Crystalburst. I'll show you on screen 2 locations on screen that you can get Crystalburst at so that you know where to reload on it. And really the reason why Crystalburst is so important is because Arch-Tempered Teostra's most powerful move, the Supernova, can be interrupted with one shot of Crystalburst. And a lot of people they're kind of already familiar with interrupting Supernova. They use Flashpods, but the problem is you have a limited number of Flashpods that you can use in the fight, and so I'm recommending everyone picks up Crystalburst and basically just spam it whenever they see Supernova or whenever Teostra is trying to fly away, because it actually works on him when he's trying to fly away as well. Now I do have to warn you, I believe even Crystalburst has a limited number of uses. I do seem to recall instances where the monster no longer flinches if you just try to spam it for the whole fight. So do use it when it is meaningful, like during Supernova, but between Crystalburst and Flashpod, really you should be okay. And that's tip number 4 is the Flashpods. Everybody should have them. And Supernova, like I said, I would use the Crystalburst for the Supernova, but if all you have is Flashpods at the time, just use your Flashpods. That'll be appropriate as well. This really is a team saver because it's usually that move that kills people. I mean, with Arch-Tempered Teostra, he's so powerful. He does so much damage per move that everybody's getting knocked around from just his regular moveset. But Supernova is really a team killer, and that's why it's so important to Flashpod it. But also, really what I would save the Flashpods for is when you're at the end of the fight and he's trying to escape to his nest. You'll know it because he starts to limp and he'll remove his aggro from you. Well, you'll want to use your Flashpods on him for the rest of the fight. Usually what you can do is knock him out of the air and that'll disable him for a little while on the ground. You'll get a lot of attacks in on him. And then once he recovers and tries to fight for a little while, he'll go back to limping and try to escape again. And essentially you just keep shooting him out of the air with the Flashpods until you've used, I believe you get 4 of them, it might be 3 of them. You get a limited number of them. But yeah, I would save all of my Flashpods for that just because it makes the fight go by faster. And any time you can make the fight go by faster is also kind of a form of defense because you're giving Teostra less time to attack you. Alright, tip number 3 is all about Arch-Tempered Teostra's moveset. In my opinion, his trickiest move is the Fire Beam. Is it just me, or does it look like his Fire Beam has way more range? Kind of like Valhazak's Effluvia Beam. It just seems to have a lot more range than it used to, and it is deadly. It deals a ton of damage, and what I'm recommending is that, well, Teostra kind of runs all over the battlefield, but if you can kind of stay near his head or behind his head, you're always going to be able to get out of the way of that fire beam, because you can tell he kind of charges it up before he uses it, but the charge is very brief. It's not like Valhazox where there's this huge windup, but there is a little bit of a windup, and if you're already near his head, you can get behind it, and that's one of his most punishable moves as well. So not only are you doing this to avoid it, you're doing it because you want to be able to punish Teostra for using it. Tip number 2 is going to be all about avoiding supernova. So let's say you don't have Crystalburst, let's say you don't have Flashpods, nobody's ready for it. How do you actually survive the supernova? Well, you're going to have to sheath your weapon as fast as you can, turn your back away from Teostra, and then when he's at the end of the move, you click the roll button and it's going to turn into a dive evade. Dive evades have huge iframes, which means you're going to be safe if you use the dive evade. The explosion won't hurt you and you'll be able to get up and keep fighting. You're probably going to have to do that probably about 3 times in the fight against Teostra, assuming you guys aren't absolutely crushing him as if you're doing a speed run. If it's a typical Teostra fight, you're going to have about 3 of those to evade. So it's really in your favor to learn how to evade those. Additionally, if you're using a shield and you intend to guard all of his moves, you're going to need the guard up skill in order to block it, and then maybe 1 or 2 levels of guard using the Iron Wall shield decorations. That would be nice as well. They're not really required, they just help with the stamina management. You see, if you try to guard it and you don't have a lot of stamina left, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble because it's going to use up the rest of your stamina and it's going to actually deal damage to you like it normally would. So be sure if you are guarding it, use the guard up skill and have enough stamina in order to guard it. Finally, we are at tip number 1. So this is kind of all about crowd control. Teostra can be put to sleep. He can also be paralyzed. And by the way, if somebody does put him to sleep, be very careful not to wake him up. Make sure that you guys all put barrels around him, and the player with the strongest one-shot move is the player who wakes him up, because he's going to get a damage multiplier on that, right? So you want him to wake him up. Don't wake him up with like your bow. But right, so he can be put to sleep, he can be paralyzed, and these are extremely helpful. You can also apply Elder Seal to him to kind of slow down his access to Supernova. But most importantly, I believe the best crowd control strategy against Teostra is to continually stun him. He can be KO'd over and over and over again. That means using hunting horns, that means using hammers, but most importantly it means using sticky ammo with the light bowgun and the heavy bowgun. So either of those will do. The heavy bowguns use the sticky ammo the best, and honestly you can just kind of chill back away from Teostra and spam those sticky ammos over and over and over again, giving your team probably about 3 KOs before the end of the fight. It's a really overpowered strategy for controlling Teostra. Having one player on your team be in charge of the crowd control is really advantageous for everyone. Alright, and that is 8 tips for defeating Arch-Tempered Teostra. Once again, I want to suggest if you have a great tip, be sure to share it in the comment section and I'll pin the best one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.